What's up, everybody? Welcome to Boxing News Live, Episode 2. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy this content so you can help me grow. Hit the thumbs up and leave a comment if you agree with my opinions or think I just look stupid. To our first topic, Canelo Alvarez is rumored to have a new opponent, and it's not the one we were expecting. Many people were hoping for David Benavidez in September. Instead, it's looking like the leading candidate right now is Badou Jack, the current WBC cruiserweight champion, that Badou Jack has turned into the front runner to land the Canelo fight. Badou Jack recently won the WBC cruiserweight title. He fights in Saudi Arabia. The fight would be staged in Saudi Arabia, and it would also give Canelo Alvarez a chance to win another world title in yet another division. For those that were looking forward to the Benavidez fight, this might be a bit of a gut punch. For those that live in reality, hey, it's not that bad of a fight, and I think it's a very compelling, interesting fight. It would also mean Canelo wouldn't fight in Las Vegas in September. Teofimo Lopez went on Max on Boxing today to announce his retirement. He doubled down. He was on the Porterway podcast yesterday and stated that he needs 9 figures in order to continue his professional boxing career, saying that he's made ESPN $100 million and only gets paid $1 million per fight. He wants more equitable wages in order for him to continue his career. He's a 2-division lineal champion at lightweight, current junior welterweight lineal champion, and holds the WBO junior welterweight title. What I'm now curious for is, what does the WBO do? Since he is saying he's a retired fighter, does the WBO allow him to keep the title, or do they immediately strip him of this belt? Because that will decide a lot for the future of Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo, very secretive on what his next move is, but made his intentions clear that he does believe he has a plan basically for beyond boxing, especially after this Josh Taylor win. Speaking of Josh Taylor looked like what my good friend James has been saying, that a lot of hard fights have caught up to him, and that now he has to kind of be selective in the opposition he faces. He had that hard Victor Postal fight, the hard Regis Prograis fight, the hard Ivan Baranchyk fight, a hard Jose Ramirez, Catterall, and now a hard Teofimo Lopez fight. In this fight, the big telling point to me is, it's not that he looked rusty, it's that his leg just doesn't look the same anymore. Taylor doesn't look like the same fighter he once was. He stated after the fight that he's moving up to welterweight. I think it's a tad bit concerning because his legacy is one of the best boxers from Europe ever, and I think he runs the risk of entering that Kell Brook zone, which, not a bad zone to be in, but also it kind of diminishes the great achievements of earlier in your career. I wanted to bring up an interesting fight that could happen from watching the Top Rank undercard. We had Henry Lebron, who I think is a very fantastic fighter, a fighter who has a defensive first style, but also can sit down on a punch and landed a few knockdowns in his fight. And then you had Robson Conceicao, who got a no contest, was well on his way to beating Nicholas Blanco before Blanco kind of found a way out and the fight got ruled a no contest. I would, in the future, like to see Henry Lebron versus Robson Conceicao as a future main event fight to see who could elevate and become a world title contender. To me, Henry Lebron is looking the part of a world title contender. To me, Robson Conceicao probably would be a world champion if it wasn't for the way the Oscar Valdez fight was scored. And I think in a different era, if he wasn't fighting these type of opponents like Shakur Stevenson and Oscar Valdez, he probably would be a long reigning world champion. And I think Conceicao, a 2016 Olympic gold medalist, very underrated fighter in the sport currently. These guys are flying under the radar. They're true professionals, and I think that people should look at this. And I'd like to see, though I'm not a fantastic matchmaker like Brad Goodman, Bruce Trampler, or even Evan Korn, that would be a heck of a matchup to see. Also wanted to bring up Bruce Shushu Carrington, sneaking into that prospect of the year range right now. Shushu, true professional, tremendous attitude, tremendous ability. We just are going to have to see how he handles stepping up into competition. But Bruce Carrington always deserves acknowledgement because he feels like a main event fighter even when he's on these undercards. He feels a lot to me kind of like a young Andre Berto even though he fights nothing like Andre Berto. When Andre Berto was on undercards, you could always tell Berto was going to be a next level fighter, a next tier fighter. And I think that you feel that same excitement and enthusiasm around Bruce Carrington. Let's talk about the foolishness this weekend. Floyd Mayweather fought John Gotti III. It was basically the circus. It's not good for the sport of boxing. It's not good for Floyd Mayweather's legacy. These type of fights are basically greed. They're based on money. And I think the sad part is at a certain point, people are just going to grow tired of seeing these fights. And it might actually leave harm to Floyd Mayweather's legacy. I know that part of his legacy and his gimmick is just milking the industry for as much money as possible. But this fight actually, on a human being level, got a tad bit scary because the Gotti family is nothing to play with. They're famous American mobsters. That's the lineage of the family. I'm sure everyone involved now are tax-paying American citizens with businesses that are built in whatever. But that's not a family to play with like they are anything that you should disrespect. And I think that the issue I have with this is Floyd is fighting a guy who's not as talented as him, who probably looked up to him, who's from a family that's very serious about their money and very serious about their respect. And though Floyd helped this young man get paid, all he did in the ring was disrespect him. And I felt disappointed because when you play with these type of fights, when you bring a person with a gangster persona in the ring, and then you're kind of making fun of him, mocking him, antagonizing him, and then a street fight ensues, you just hope that nothing ensues outside the ring. Yes, there was conflict after the bell, but I just hope it doesn't continue because often in those type of conflicts, it's never the main people that get injured in those conflicts. It's the people around them that don't have the same access to money, that are more accessible, that tend to be the victims or tend to find themselves in harm's way. And I found it very unnecessary when we're coming into the sport to see boxing, to see great opportunities, and to really give ourselves opportunities. I felt like it was very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And I hope that these type of events from Floyd don't continue because if he wants to do an exhibition, he has to do an exhibition in a different light, in my opinion. Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney had some weird conflict at a nightclub this weekend. For me, I'm real big on the bottle service scene, and I go to nightclubs like never. But apparently they were both at some day party place where like really attractive people hang out, and like you go and you look really cool and stuff, wear fancy clothes, and people go, oh, it's him, he's famous, he's rich. So one of those places, Shakur, I guess, sent over, I feel so weird saying this, but like he sent over a bottle or something to Devin Haney basically saying, when are you going to sign the contract? They made exchanges on Twitter, which I don't even really care to break down because I just don't care. Let's just say what it is. Shakur wants everything Devin has. He wants to be the undisputed lightweight champion. When you're going to try to chase down the king, this is the type of antics you do. You antagonize. When you are the king, you have to accept that other people are going to want what you have. That is part of keeping your spot in the sport as the top of the position. One thing I've always liked about Shakur Stevenson is he doesn't make friends in his division. If you're in his division, he doesn't like you. I love that from a fighter. One thing I like about Devin Haney, he takes hard fights. I love that in a fighter. Let's hope these two can make a fight because that would be a great fight. Who cares what some people in their mid to early 20s say on the internet? They're probably still figuring out who they are, borderline insecure about who they are socially at times, but they're fantastic fighters. I don't really care as much about what they're doing on a social level because I've kind of matured past that and I'm doing my own thing. In terms of a fist fight and getting into the ring, they're both really good, and I hope that these type of antics that bring in different types of people and add excitement, I guess, can create a monetization level to entice both of them to get in the ring. Jaime Munguia beat Sergey Derevyanchenko, and Jaime Munguia has had this unfortunate label of being a guy who basically has had a lot of shaky performances, and kind of after the Dennis Hogan fight, really avoided interesting fights. And this has been his first real interesting fight in at least 6 or 7 fights. I know in 2018 he was like a breakout star at 21. Now we're 5 years later and we're kind of still in the same spot he was. The only problem is he was a 154-pound world champion, went to 160, never even fought for a world title at 160, was Demetrius Andrade's mandatory forever, never fought him. Now this is his first official middleweight bout. He fought Jimmy Kelly at a catchweight at 165, so that really was his first super middleweight bout, but we never talk about things like that. Derevyanchenko, a true professional. Derevyanchenko is kind of a guy that if it was going to be his era, he probably would have beat Daniel Jacobs and Gennady Golovkin and gone on to have his moment. He's the Hall of Very Good, the guy that gave everyone in his era a good fight, but just never could win. I think he's the modern-day Matt Korobov, where it's just things didn't quite work out for him. But for Munguia, I'm really hoping this is the spark that gets him moving towards fights we actually care about. Because 5 years ago, he was someone we were talking about, like, man, this guy's going to rule our Saturday nights. And I think most fight fans have kind of gotten bored of him. They've matured into middle adulthood, and they're kind of like, whatever, dude, you've spent 5 years doing nothing. I don't care. And that's not good for the sport. So I hope Munguia takes this win on Tuesday. When you see this, there's a list of 5 fighters I think he could fight. That's on proboxtv.com/news. Go there and check it out. Let me know what you think. Speaking of ProBox TV, why don't you go watch the fight on proboxtv.com? $1.99 for the fights. We got Saul Sanchez versus Franklin Gonzalez and Oscar Alvarez versus Jonathan Cardozo. Those 2 bouts to me are absolute humdingers. Really, really evenly matched and competitive bouts. I'm going to be tuning in. I really recommend that you guys tune in too. Also, this weekend, we had Sonny Edwards taking on Andreas Campos. He won. He didn't really look that particularly impressive. He looked flat. Bam Rodriguez looked flat in his last performance. It's kind of like what Dakota was saying on the pod this weekend. I think these guys cut too much weight. They have some off performances. With Sonny Edwards, I see a huge talent level there. I see a huge ability to market himself. But I also see a disconnect where he's getting in the ring and he's trying to play with different styles, but he's not necessarily fighting in the Sonny Edwards style. So I'm hoping to see him mature into fighting the way that he wants to fight to win the fight effectively. In this fight, I feel like he played with his food a little too much, and he made the fight harder than it had to be. I think the fight against him and Bam is a tricky one. Also, one that I think is losing momentum to me, maybe controversial take, but they're both coming off of performances that aren't as compelling to me. And I think that the fight needs to be made next, or we run the risk of kind of losing a little bit of hope. One last thought before I preview this weekend's cards. Too much boxing. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there was a Showbox card. There was a Golden Boy card with Walter Santibanes, who, if you didn't see that, which I'll briefly touch on, Walter Santibanes probably won the weekend. Nobody watched this fight. He beats Gucci Manny Flores in Gucci Manny Flores' hometown. Freaking awesome performance. Just too much boxing. So that performance goes under the radar. I haven't even seen the Showbox card yet. I'm sure each fight there was evenly contested. Really good fights. 360 Promotions card, didn't see that. The Matchroom card outside of Sonny Edwards' fight, didn't see that. Golden Boy card, missed a lot of that. Saw the Top Rank card, but there was just too much boxing. And that's a problem because we look at this weekend, okay boxing, like okay, but not great boxing weekend. So wouldn't have been mad if a Jaime Munguia was on this weekend. Wouldn't be mad if a Showbox was on this weekend. We just had too much last week. And unfortunately, that's how boxing can be. Too much boxing, too little boxing. Regis Prograis, he's taken on Danielito Zorrilla. My man Abe Gonzalez has always been high on Zorrilla. Zorrilla gave Arnold Barbosa a harder fight than most people will say. Most people will be like, man, that wasn't that close of a fight. It was a closer fight than you think. You know, I'm as big of a fan of the ABJ, you know, Arnold Barbosa with the iced out chain that can light the way. I'm a huge Arnold Barbosa guy. But that being said, I think Zorrilla is a tough guy. He's taken the fight on short notice for Liam Perro, who had to pull out of the fight with injury. It's a homecoming. Regis is bringing a world title fight back to New Orleans. That's a really cool moment. It's his first fight with Matchroom. I hate to say this, but it kind of feels like the same vein as the Jose Ramirez versus Richard Comey fight, where it's like a glorified club show. It's like a club show plus fight, like a bigger salary, but the level of interest is local market hardcore fight fans and not much beyond that. And it's a shame because Regis is one of my favorite fighters. I think he's one of the most interesting and genuine people in the sport. My only issue with Regis is he can get caught with clean punches sometimes that not a little bit more than my liking, coming up in that Oakland style of boxing. I like a guy, I see Regis as a rhythm fighter, a guy that when he gets in his groove, he gets going. But I think this is going to be an interesting fight, but I think this is going to be a fight where Regis can make a dominant statement. And then what we really need is Regis in a fight that's relevant in 2023, because the sport is in a better place if Regis Prograis is fighting and getting good television dates, visible fights that people care about. Undercard is pretty sleepy. It's not one that you're going to write home to your mom about. Probably the most notable undercard fight is Ginny Fuchs. She's taken on Indeya Smith. I think I said that name right. If I'm sorry to Smith if I said your name wrong. Ginny Fuchs to me was someone that I had labeled as a breakout superstar of women's boxing, southpaw, friends with Michaela Mayer, tons of knockout power in my opinion, at a lower weight, could be a very dominant force, could eventually end up fighting someone like Sinise Estrada, could fight Yoka Valle, could fight Marlon Esparza. There's all these different fights that I could foresee her being in. Yet I was surprised when Top Rank didn't continue to have her on Top Rank shows. I'm not sure what happened, but I was kind of startled by that because I thought that she would have been a no-brainer, given also she's had some mental health things that she's overcome, a very compelling story, and she can really fight. Now, Smith, on the other hand, recently beat Sulem Urbina, and she can also really fight, but they're two different contrasting styles. Fuchs has a really good ability to control distance, gauge distance, and punch with you. Smith is a rough and rugged physical fighter who's going to try to use pressure, and more pressure to win a fight based on volume. If you fight her fight, you will lose. I think this is a very interesting fight, and Fuchs has ties to the area. She's an LSU alum. It would be great to see if she could end up fighting on some of Regis's cards, so the two that have New Orleans ties together could actually end up kind of maybe building together and building a fight scene in New Orleans. When we go over to Showtime, we're going to see something somewhat interesting. Tszyu versus Carlos Ocampo. You might be saying, Uncle Lukey, why isn't Tszyu fighting Jermell Charlo? Well, I'll give you the answer. Jermell Charlo is still injured. Instead, he's fighting Carlos Ocampo. I'm not really sure why. I'm sure that the sanctioning bodies told him, yo, that's who you have to fight. Or maybe they didn't. Ocampo recently had a somewhat competitive fight with Sebastian Fundora. I somewhat watched that fight. I won't lie. I wasn't super invested in that fight. I'm not going to lie to you again. I'm probably going to watch a movie for most of this fight. I might jump on and podcast with you guys during this fight. I might wait until the morning with Dakota. I think Tszyu and Gervonta Davis are number 1 and 2 for Fighter of the Year right now. This performance will tell me who it is. If you ask me, I think Gervonta Davis right now is in the midpoint, the Fighter of the Year in 2023. But if Tszyu does something sensational, he could possibly steal it. That being said, people are tuning into this fight and to watch him make his first defense of his interim WBO junior middleweight title and just see him more than I think they're tuning in to say, man, I can't wait to see this competitive bout between these two. This is more of a spectacle to see Tszyu, who's coming off an impressive win over Tony Harrison when many people doubted him. Co-main event, I hope makes it to Showtime, is Raiz Aleem against Sam Goodman. Raiz Aleem has been deserving of big opportunities for so long, yet has not been getting them. Raiz Aleem finally in an eliminator spot. After this fight, I believe he will be the mandatory for Marlon Tapales. It would be fantastic to see Raiz Aleem get a win and fight for a world title because he has not been afforded that luxury yet. Guys like Kenny Sims Jr., Arnold Barbosa, Aleem. You always have to cheer for these type of fighters because it seems like the system at times are against them, even if they aren't. And it's hard to not cheer with the underdog in a sport like boxing. We are 100% biased for Aleem, and we're hoping to see him do well. I also think it's a credit to Regis for him going to Australia to fight and compete and fight one of Tim Tszyu's stablemates in Australia. Pretty impressive stuff. Also in the UK, something that if you want to know, Frazer Clarke is taking on Marius Walk. It's crazy to me that Walk still fights. I felt like he was fairly old 10 years ago. So I feel like if this is the same guy, he's like older. And that's wild to me. Because I remember being at the Barclays Center when that building first opened, when Danny Garcia fought Eric Morales, and someone telling me that guy was going to beat Klitschko, if this is the same fighter I'm thinking of. Now he's fighting Frazer Clarke, who's a young pro in terms of experience, but really about my age, in his late 30s, getting going and trying to rush into some title fights. I think Big Frazer is a very interesting fighter and someone that you really should take notice of because he's a very, very good and talented fighter who I think has a personality similar to a Tony Bellew and could become a beloved UK folk hero if he gets the right fights. That is it. I hope this program keeps you well informed. I hope you enjoy this product that I'm giving you. I'm probably going to make it whether you like it or not, just because it helps me stay sane and kind of keeps me talking to myself. But that is the news. We can really go for anybody if you give us a like, a subscription, even a comment. All of that stuff goes a long way. We're building this channel from the ground up, and we're building it with people that believe in the product. So if you believe in what we're doing, please build with us. It's Lukey. I'm out.